Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ton Does Linux. I'm your host, and wow, what a week it's been for the Linux community. We're talking about some absolutely massive milestones that honestly, I didn't think we'd see this soon. Linux Gaming just hit a number that's going to make Windows users do a double take. KDE Plasma is about to get a feature that should have existed years ago, and we've got a brand new kernel release that's packed with improvements. Oh, and there's a security issue you definitely need to know about. So grab some coffee, settle in, and let's dive into what might be the most exciting Linux news for this week so far. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Alright, let's kick things off with the foundation of everything we do in Linux land, the kernel. And this week, we got not one, but several major updates that are going to impact pretty much everyone watching this video. First up, Linux Kernel 6.16 officially dropped, and folks, this is a big one. Now I know kernel releases can sometimes feel a bit abstract, like okay cool, new version number, but what does it actually mean for me? Well, let me break it down for you. Kernel 6.16 brings some seriously impressive hardware support improvements. We're talking about better support for newer AMD and Intel graphics cards, improved power management that's going to extend your laptop battery life, and some under-the-hood optimizations that you might not see directly, but you'll definitely feel in terms of overall system responsiveness. But here's what really caught my attention: the networking stack improvements. If you're running any kind of server workload, or even just doing heavy file transfers, you're going to notice the difference. The TCP performance optimizations alone are worth the upgrade. Now, while we're celebrating 6.16, the kernel team is already hard at work on 6.17, and the early previews are looking absolutely incredible. The GPU driver improvements are being led by some major Intel updates. We're talking stable Intel Xe3 Panther Lake support and SR-IOV for BattleMage graphics. For those of you who might not be familiar with SR-IOV, think of it as virtualization for your graphics card. This is huge for anyone running virtual machines or containers that need GPU acceleration. It's the kind of feature that makes Linux an even more compelling choice for development and enterprise workloads. But wait, there's more. Linux 6.17 is also bringing support for x86 MacBook Pro touch bars. Yes, you heard that right. If you're one of those brave souls running Linux on a MacBook Pro with a touch bar, you're finally going to get proper support for that little OLED strip. It's been a long time coming, and honestly, it's pretty cool to see the Linux community continuing to support hardware that even Apple has moved away from. On the stability front, we also got 3 new stable kernel releases this week: 6.15.9, 6.12.41, and 6.6.101. These might not be as exciting as the bleeding edge stuff, but they're absolutely crucial for anyone running production systems. Security fixes, bug patches, and stability improvements. The boring but essential stuff that keeps our systems running smoothly. Speaking of security, both SUSE and Red Hat pushed out important kernel security updates this week. Nothing earth-shattering, but it's a good reminder to keep your systems updated. I know it can be tempting to put off kernel updates, especially on systems that are working perfectly, but trust me, staying current with security patches is always worth it. Alright, let's shift gears and talk about what's happening in the world of Linux distributions, because this week has been absolutely packed with releases and announcements that are going to shape the Linux landscape for months to come. The biggest news, and I mean biggest, is that Debian 13, codenamed Trixie, is set to launch on August 9th. That's literally this Friday as I'm recording this. Now, if you've been following Debian development, you know this has been a long time coming, and the feature set is honestly impressive. Debian 13 is shipping with KDE Plasma 6.3.5, GNOME 48, and here's the kicker: Linux kernel 6.12 LTS. That LTS designation is huge because it means long-term support and stability that enterprise users and conservative system administrators absolutely love. This is going to be the foundation for countless servers, workstations, and embedded systems for years to come. What I find particularly interesting about this release is how Debian is balancing cutting-edge features with their legendary stability. GNOME 48 brings some really nice quality-of-life improvements, and KDE Plasma 6.3.5 it's beautiful. The polish and performance improvements in the Plasma 6 series have been remarkable. Now, while we're waiting for Debian 13 to officially drop, Ubuntu hasn't been sitting idle. The third snapshot of Ubuntu 25.10 is now available for testing, and it's featuring GNOME 49 desktop, with an expected Linux kernel 6.17. This is Ubuntu really pushing the envelope with newer software, which is exactly what you'd expect from their development cycle. One thing that caught my eye in the Ubuntu 25.10 notes is that they're dropping GNOME on Xorg. This is part of the broader industry move toward Wayland, and while it might cause some short-term compatibility issues for users with specific hardware or software requirements, it's ultimately the right direction for the future of Linux desktop computing. But let's talk about some of the smaller, more specialized distributions that also made news this week. HeliumOS 10 launched, and this is really interesting. It's based on Alma Linux, but it's specifically designed for desktop use. Think of it as taking the enterprise-grade foundation of Alma Linux and making it user-friendly for everyday desktop computing. I've been testing HeliumOS for a few days now, and I have to say, the approach is pretty clever. You get the stability and security focus of an enterprise distribution, but with a desktop environment that doesn't feel like you need a computer science degree to use effectively. It's definitely worth checking out if you're looking for something that sits between the bleeding edge and the ultra-conservative. On the single-board computer front, Diet Pi 9.15 landed with a Debian Trixie upgrade script. For those of you running Raspberry Pis, Orange Pis, or any other ARM-based single-board computers, Diet Pi has always been one of the best options for getting a lean, efficient system up and running quickly. The Trixie upgrade script is going to make it much easier to keep these systems current as Debian 13 becomes the new stable release. And finally, PortUX 2.2 got a mention on Distro Watch this week. PortUX is one of those distributions that flies under the radar for most people, but it's got a really dedicated following in certain niches. It's designed to be portable and lightweight, perfect for running from USB drives or in situations where you need a full Linux environment but can't install anything permanently. What I love about weeks like this is how they showcase the incredible diversity of the Linux ecosystem. You've got Debian providing rock-solid stability, Ubuntu pushing the boundaries with newer software, specialized distributions like HeliumOS finding their niche, and projects like Diet Pi and PortUX serving specific use cases that the big distributions might not address perfectly. Okay, now we're getting to the stuff that's going to directly impact how you interact with your Linux desktop every single day. And honestly, this section might be my favorite part of this week's news because we're talking about features that are going to make Linux desktops more polished and user-friendly than ever before. Let's start with the absolute game changer. KDE Plasma 6.5 is finally getting automatic day and night theme switching. I know what some of you are thinking. Wait, this is 2025, and we're just getting automatic theme switching. And yeah, you're right to be a little surprised. This is a feature that macOS and Windows have had for years, and it's something the Linux community has been asking for forever. But here's the thing, when KDE does something, they tend to do it right. This isn't just a simple switch to dark mode at sunset feature. The implementation allows you to set different global themes for day and night, which means you can have completely different color schemes, wallpapers, panel configurations, the works. It's scheduled to land in Plasma 6.5, which is set for release on October 21st. I've been testing the development builds, and the transition is smooth as butter. You can set it to follow your system's sunrise and sunset times, or you can manually configure the switch times if you're a night owl or an early bird. The best part? It remembers your preferences per theme, so if you have specific applications or widgets configured differently for light and dark modes, it all just works. But that's not the only visual improvement coming to Plasma 6.5. They're also finally adding rounded bottom corners to Windows. Now, this might sound like a small cosmetic change, but it's part of a broader effort to make Plasma feel more modern and cohesive. The rounded corners, combined with the improved shadow rendering and the new sidebar resizing behavior, make the whole desktop feel more polished and professional. Speaking of professional, let's talk about what's happening in GNOME land. Because they're making some pretty bold moves, GNOME 49 is dropping X11 support entirely. This is huge, folks. We're talking about the end of an era and the full commitment to Wayland as the future of Linux desktop graphics. Now I know this is going to be controversial. There are still some edge cases where X11 works better than Wayland, especially with certain proprietary applications or specific hardware configurations. But the GNOME team has decided that the benefits of focusing entirely on Wayland outweigh the compatibility concerns. And honestly, I think they're right. Wayland offers better security, better performance, better multi-monitor support, and it's the foundation that's going to enable features we haven't even thought of yet. Yes, there might be some short-term pain for users with specific needs, but this is the kind of bold decision that moves the entire ecosystem forward. GNOME 49 is scheduled for its RC release on August 30th, with the final release coming on September 17th. The development builds I've been testing show some really nice performance improvements, especially in terms of animation smoothness and memory usage. It feels snappier and more responsive than previous versions. Now, let's not forget about the window manager enthusiasts out there. IceWM 3.8.2 dropped this week with new iSesh actions. For those of you who prefer a more minimalist approach to desktop computing, IceWM continues to be one of the best options for a lightweight, efficient window manager that doesn't sacrifice functionality for simplicity. What I love about the current state of Linux desktop environments is the incredible variety. You've got KDE pushing the boundaries of what's possible with customization and features, GNOME focusing on simplicity and modern design principles, and projects like IceWM ensuring that users who want maximum control and minimal resource usage have excellent options. The automatic theme switching in KDE Plasma 6.5 might seem like a small feature, but it represents something bigger. The Linux desktop ecosystem is finally reaching the level of polish and user-friendliness that makes it a genuine alternative to proprietary operating systems for everyday users. We're not just talking about power users and developers anymore. We're talking about your parents, your friends who aren't tech-savvy, people who just want their computer to work well and look good while doing it. All right, gamers, this section is for you, and I have some absolutely incredible news that's going to make you want to celebrate. Are you ready for this? Linux gaming on Steam has hit 2.89% market share. We are literally on the doorstep of 3%. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, okay, 3%, that's still pretty small. But let me put this in perspective for you. Just 5 years ago, Linux gaming was sitting at around 0.8% on Steam. We've more than tripled our market share, and the growth is accelerating. This represents millions of gamers who have made the switch to Linux and are loving it. The July 2025 Steam Hardware and Software Survey shows a 0.32% increase from the previous month, which might not sound like much, but in terms of actual user numbers, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of new Linux gamers. And here's what's really exciting. This growth is happening despite the fact that SteamOS for desktop PCs hasn't even been officially released yet. Speaking of Steam Deck, the most played games data for July 2025 just came out, and it's fascinating to see what's popular in the Linux gaming space. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt continues to dominate, which makes sense given how well it runs on Proton. But we're also seeing newer titles like Clair Obscur, Expedition 33 showing up as Steam Deck playable, which demonstrates how quickly game compatibility is improving. And that brings us to Proton 10.02 beta, which dropped this week with even more gaming improvements. For those who might not be familiar, Proton is Valve's compatibility layer that allows Windows games to run on Linux, and it's honestly one of the most important pieces of software in the Linux ecosystem right now. The 10.02 beta brings support for games like Stardust Gate and Star Ocean: The Divine Force, and the performance improvements across the board are really impressive. What I love about Proton development is how rapidly it's evolving. Games that were completely unplayable on Linux just a few months ago are now running at near-native performance levels. But it's not just about compatibility, it's about performance. In many cases, games are actually running better on Linux through Proton than they do natively on Windows. Better frame rates, lower input lag, more consistent performance. It's getting to the point where choosing Linux for gaming isn't a compromise anymore. It's often the better choice. Now let's talk about hardware support, because this week brought some really exciting developments. The Intel layoffs that happened recently have raised some concerns about Linux kernel driver development, and it's something we need to keep an eye on. Intel has been one of the biggest contributors to Linux kernel development, especially for graphics and hardware support. While the immediate impact might be minimal, this could affect the pace of new hardware support and driver optimization in the long term. It's a reminder of how much the Linux ecosystem depends on corporate contributions, and why community involvement and alternative funding models are so important. On a more positive note, Tuxedo launched the InfinityBook Pro 15, which they're calling a premium ultrabook that puts Linux first. This is exactly the kind of hardware we need more of. Laptops designed from the ground up to work perfectly with Linux, with all the drivers and optimizations you need right out of the box. The InfinityBook Pro 15 comes with everything you'd expect from a premium laptop: high-resolution display, powerful processors, excellent build quality, but with the added benefit of knowing that every component has been tested and optimized for Linux. No more hunting for drivers. No more compatibility issues. No more compromises. What's really encouraging about the current state of Linux gaming and hardware support is the momentum. We're not just seeing incremental improvements. We're seeing fundamental shifts in how the industry approaches Linux compatibility. Game developers are starting to test on Steam Deck during development. Hardware manufacturers are considering Linux support from the design phase, and the community is more active and engaged than ever before. Alright, now we need to talk about something serious, a security issue that every Linux user should be aware of. This week, cybersecurity researchers discovered a previously undocumented Linux backdoor called Plague. And folks, this one is concerning for several reasons. The Plague backdoor is a malicious PAM module that managed to evade detection for an entire year. For those who might not be familiar with PAM, that's Pluggable Authentication Modules. It's basically the system that handles login authentication on Linux systems. This backdoor embedded itself directly into the login process, which means it could grant covert access to systems without leaving obvious traces. What makes this particularly scary is that it wasn't detected by VirusTotal or most traditional antivirus solutions. It was designed to be stealthy, and it was very good at its job. The backdoor could resist system upgrades and maintain persistence even when administrators thought they were cleaning their systems. Now, before anyone panics, this appears to be a targeted attack rather than widespread malware. But it's a good reminder of why security hygiene is so important. Keep your systems updated, monitor your authentication logs, and be suspicious of any unusual login activity. Speaking of security concerns, the Arch user repository made headlines again this week, and unfortunately, not for good reasons. Malware has resurfaced in the AUR, which has led to some heated discussions in the community about security practices and package vetting. The AUR is one of Arch Linux's greatest strengths. It gives users access to an enormous repository of community-maintained packages. But it's also one of the potential security weak points because packages aren't as rigorously vetted as they are in official repositories. It's a classic trade-off between convenience and security. This situation has gotten so frustrating for some developers that the DuckStation PS1 emulator developer is considering dropping Linux support entirely due to AUR-related issues. This would be a real loss for the Linux gaming community, and it highlights how security problems can have broader ecosystem impacts. On a more positive note, let's talk about some exciting community developments. Hyperland, the popular Wayland compositor, launched HyperPerks, a paid membership program that offers exclusive perks to supporters. This is an interesting approach to funding open-source development, and it's something we're seeing more projects experiment with. The idea is that by offering premium features or early access to paying supporters, projects can generate sustainable funding while keeping the core software free and open source. It's a model that could work well for other projects that have dedicated user bases. We also saw some great community events announced this week. COSCUP x RubyConf 2025 is happening in Taiwan on August 9th to 10th, and the Nextcloud Community Conference 2025 is coming up. These events are crucial for the open source community. They're where ideas are shared, collaborations are formed, and the future direction of projects is discussed. The security issues we've discussed this week are serious, but they're also reminders of why the open source model is so powerful. When vulnerabilities are discovered, they're disclosed publicly, patches are developed collaboratively, and the entire community benefits from the improved security. It's not perfect, but it's a model that tends to produce more secure software in the long run. Wow, what a week! Let me just recap the absolute highlights because there was so much packed into these 7 days that it's almost hard to believe. Linux gaming hit 2.89% on Steam. We're literally knocking on the door of 3%, which is a milestone I honestly didn't think we'd see this in. KDE Plasma 6.5 is bringing automatic theme switching, which is going to make Linux desktops feel more polished and user-friendly than ever. We got Linux Kernel 6.16 with fantastic hardware support improvements, and Debian 13 is launching this Friday with an incredible feature set. Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought was the biggest story this week. Was it the Steam gaming milestone? The KDE theme switching? The security concerns? I read every comment, and I love hearing your perspectives on these developments. Next week, we'll be covering the Debian 13 launch, and I'm planning a special segment on the state of Linux hardware support in 2025. You won't want to miss it. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep making Linux awesome. I'll see you in the next one.